So I want to welcome everyone to another episode of Spiritual Spelunking, which is our opportunity at HR to get to know our faculty and other contemporary ideas around our spiritual lives and the different dimensions that they can hold. We've been doing this program now for over 10 years, and it's always exciting to get to hear from a new faculty member. So I want to introduce Dr. Zahavi, who I'm just getting to know, and who is going to be teaching on Talmudic paths to spirituality. So please, I don't think we have anybody online yet, but somebody might dial in. So anyway, we have the option.
So I'm speaking only to the people here.
So far, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes it nicer, cozier. Okay, but you're kind of blocked by me being here. All right.
Yeah. I think we should leave this set up because people may call in as the session goes on.
That's fine. That's fine. So I didn't look this up. I meant to look up what does the word spelunking mean, but I think my impression, my recollection is it means going into a cave and exploring. And so spiritual spelunking, someone thought that spirituality requires that you go into a dark cave and light a light and explore and look for interesting meanings, I suppose. And so I believe anytime you do spiritual work, there's an element of seeking enlightenment or some kind of insight where things are darker and not understood. That's not always the only metaphor. So let me explore with you some Talmudic spirituality, what I call Talmudic spirituality. And indeed, I picked out a passage that deals with what, in retrospect, I would call meditation rules, which seems, like anomalous. The idea that you can have rules for meditation doesn't seem particularly perfect. And then maybe it's more like spiritual techniques. But these spiritual techniques are rabbinic. And rabbis have a particular personality range where they operate. It may not be the same range as other spiritual types in other religions. It definitely isn't the range. And it may be a little strange when you hear what they say, but it's the way they think through the problem given the tools that they have. So the tools that they have are Talmud teachings and rabbinic learning. And in 1985, I guess I was invited to Bar-Ilan University to give a seminar in the Talmud department, and I did something related to these texts, to these passages for the Talmud department, and I gave them what I thought was a chance to explore some insights into Kavanah. So very frequently when we talk about meditation or spirituality in Judaism, not always, but very frequently, the term Kavanah pops up. And Kavanah means a lot of things to a lot of people throughout the ages. It doesn't mean the same thing to everyone. But in this case, I was working at that time, or had been working on Brachot, the tractate Brachot. And tractate Brachot, not surprisingly, in the fifth parak, in the fifth chapter, has rules for achieving the correct kavanah for the tefillah. Now, there are two levels of kavanah that the Mishnah talks about and then the Talmud talks about. There are different levels of kavanah. They're different for different purposes. For the Shema, you have one level of kavanah, which has its own set of rules. For the tefillah, the Shemona Esrei Brachot, you have another set of kavanot, which have a slightly different level and component of rules. In those days, now 1985 was 32 years ago. So in those days, 32 years ago, life was so simple. and we could actually just be happy with talking about things like strict rules of halakha, lenient rules of halakha, modes and methods of achieving concentration, and not even use the words of meditation that much, or be attuned that much to the things that we are more commonly exposed to these days. 32 years later, we have very wide exposure internal to the Jewish community, the traditional and the progressive Jewish communities. Even the very Orthodox are exposed to ideas of meditation and spirituality, and that was not so much the case 30 plus years ago. That's number one. Number two is the world has changed. And now the world has always been a place where we have the ability to be spiritual and meditative, and those things that impede us from the ability to have spirituality and meditation. Broadly, let's just say distractions, right? There's always been distractions in life. And nowadays, the thing that strikes me, and that's another lecture entirely, another session or discussion, is our life basically, sometimes I think, is distractions all the time, interrupted by the ability to actually concentrate on something for more than a few seconds. And especially when, oh, excuse me, wait, I just have to check my yeah, I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I'm afraid I'm going to hit someone who's walking down the street because they're reading the messages on their phone. Or, I walk into my grandchildren, 5 grandchildren, now fortunately, only 2 of them are old enough to have phones, and they don't even look up to say, hello. Now, what happens when all 5 of them have phones? I will have lost touch with my grandchildren entirely. Yeah. So I think that the world has changed. And so I want to come to a particular passage and then give you some insight into a Bavli statement that enlightens that passage. So the Mishnah says that you should have kavanah for the basic prayers, Shema and Shemona Esrei Brachot, the Tefillah. Tosefta says, as an appendix to the Mishnah, that we should avoid intrusions, disruptions of one's concentration, and achieve what is called in the Mishnah and in the Tosefta a solemn disposition as a requisite before you recite your prayers, especially the Tefillah, the Shemona Esrei. Tosefta says, lightheartedness disturbs one's ability to concentrate, to meditate. I use the term in 85 more concentrate, but now I would really consider meditate. And Tosefta's words, one may not stand to pray after conversation or after laughter or after lightheartedness, but only after speaking words of wisdom. So there's the principle enunciated by the Tanaim. In order to achieve a meditative mindset, you've got to, here's our technology, here's our technique. Words of wisdom will put you into the meditative state. Now, not every religion, Eastern, Western, Christian, Buddhist, not every religion will have anything of the sort that says something like this. But this is where the Talmudic insight starts. So, avoiding moods and motivations that do not permit meditation. How do you do that? That's a nice thought. That's a good idea. But how do you do that? What are the details of this technology? Thanks a lot. Announcing a new technology of meditative consciousness is a great thing. But what's the code? Write a few lines of code. Tell us how do we get this app to work? How do we get to the point where we're having our proper meditative mindset? And the rabbis do the best they can. Remember, this is, you've got your timeline. Rabbis are before Freud and modern psychology and meditative, advanced meditative techniques. Rabbinic literature may parallel some of the classical Buddhist literature, but they didn't know each other. They didn't overlap. And so here's what one passage says. So our rabbis have taught, this is on Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph, one may not stand to pray after judging a case or after discussing a matter of law, but only after speaking a decided law, halakha psuka. So now the rabbis are really already deeply into it. What is the proper preparation for the meditation that we want to have for prayer? So judging a case, you've just finished the judgment. You're still wearing your robes. You're exiting to your chambers. Can you stop and say Shemona Esrei? No. Why? Okay. Discussing a matter of law. You've just come out of the Beit Midrash. You've spent the last hour discussing a Talmud passage with a matter of law. Can you stop and just start praying Shemona Esrei? No. But only after speaking of a decided law, a halakha psuka. What's the basis for this? We'll come to ask that question. What's the basis? But the rabbis in this passage are not asking whether this is a good idea, a bad idea. They take this for granted. Oh yeah, that's true. Halakha psuka, not any of the other, not the other two examples. So what Talmud does this? What's an example of halakha psuka? What's an example of a decided law? What kind of decision of law? Give us a for instance. What do you mean? So said Abaye, the law is like that of Rav Zera. Rav Zera said the following law, get ready. The women of Israel imposed a stringency upon themselves, for if they observe a discharge of a drop of blood, even as small as a mustard seed, they sit and observe 7 clean days during which no new discharges are observed before resuming marital relations. That's a halakha psuka. Wow, great example. That's exactly what came to mind when you asked me about a halakha psuka. Okay, all right.
Definitely does give one pause.
Well, wait, it gets better. It gets better. Rabbah said, it is a law like that of Rabbi Hoshaya. Rabbi Hoshaya said, a person may mix his grain with its chaff. Mixing your grain with its chaff, the chaff and grain have been removed from one another, but you can mix them back together before bringing it into your storehouse so that his animals may eat it. Why would you do this? It seems counterproductive. The whole threshing is to remove the grain from the chaff. Why would you mix it back together? So that it will be free from the tithing requirement, since thereby it will resemble grain which has not been winnowed and will not become liable to tithes when brought into the storage, because liability to tithing only starts when you bring it into your house or into your storage place. Now, my son reminded me of this law when I was out in his backyard in Zichron Yaakov, and I said, you have grapes growing on your grapevines. I'm going to take some grapes. And he said, fine, you can eat them here, and there's no problem. But if you bring them into the house, you have to take Meiser and before you eat them, because as soon as you bring them into the house, it's Chayav Meiser. I said, you're right. Whoever thought of that? Because guess what? In Teaneck, I don't have a grapevine, and I didn't, this never came up. So Rabbi Hoshaya said, think about this halakha psuka about mixing your chaff with your grain so that you can avoid maasros, the tithing requirement. Or if you wish, you could try this one, like that of Rav Huna. For Rav Huna said Rav Zera, one who lets blood from animals dedicated to the temple, one may derive no personal benefit from that blood, and one who uses that blood for ordinary purposes has misappropriated temple property. So you have an animal dedicated to the temple. If you let blood from it and then you use it for some profane purpose, you have misappropriated temple. You have performed a misappropriation. You've stolen. You've done a bad thing. So these are the three examples that the Talmud gives for halakha psuka. These laws will activate inner meditative space and allow you to begin saying the Shemona Esrei brachot.
Obviously.
So does this or does this not beg the question? WTF?
Trying to be PC.
I don't think you can say that when you're studying Talmud, but what the blah is going on here? Why would you pick these out? So in order to really try to make some spiritual spelunking happen here, we're going to go deep into the inner dark chambers of the rabbinic mind and see if we can poke around, maybe light a little flashlight and find out, why did you choose these examples? Is there anything that we can possibly get out of these examples? Before we get to the trying to explain part, here's another couple of examples of what you might want to ponder before you say your prayer. Before he went to pray, Abdan in Yerushalmi Brachot, in another passage, asked Rabbi, how many levels of holy things are there? He said to them, 4. How many levels of heave offering are there? He said to him, 3. Then, after speaking these particular straightforward questions and answers, he says, okay, we're ready to pray. You can go and pray. Now, Rabbi Chia the Great said, in all my days, I never concentrated properly on my prayer. One time I wanted to do that, so I meditated as follows. I said to myself, who goes up first before the king? The Arkafta or the Exilarch? The Arkafta is a high dignitary in Persia, or the Exilarch is the chief of the Exilarchic government. So that's it. That's the whole thing. That's the whole preparation. Who goes up before the president, right? Who goes up before, what's the pecking order of government all about? Is the Arkafta higher or is the Exilarch higher? And after thinking through that particularly troubling problem, he said, okay, I'm ready to pray. Right. Samuel said, and at least here I'm kind of saying, okay, I kind of get this one. Samuel said, I count birds to help me induce the proper state of mind. So he would look up in the sky, he would see birds flying, and he'd say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, I'll pray now. Rabbi Ben Chia said, I count rows of bricks in a wall to help me achieve the proper state of mind for meditation. So I count bricks. Let's see. There's a nail, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tiles. 1, 2, 3. I'm ready to pray. So what are all of these techniques and how, quirky can we get? That's basically the Talmud's challenge here. But there is, I believe, some underlying thinking going on. So of course, repetitive counting and of birds or bricks or tiles or whatever, that seems to me okay. It seems to allow for the clearing of distractions from consciousness and say, okay, my mind is a little bit more clear. I'm not worried about, the bills I didn't pay and the shopping I didn't do or whatever it is, the emails I didn't see or answer. I mean, the list can go on and on and on. But what about those three that I mentioned first? And what is there a possible way to find a general principle by which these make a little bit more sense? So I'll stop before giving you what I thought was a solution. And I'll ask you, do you have any thoughts about it? Any thoughts whatsoever?
The first three were like Kilayim or Lahavdil, where they were like they were prohibited mixing. There's something about like that simplified dualistic character where it's a settled law. You're not fighting over it. Could have some kind of meditative.
On the highest, level here, looking down from 10,000 feet, settled laws are going to make your mind more able to, stop going back and forth like a ping pong ball. You're going to be able to achieve some kind of meditative state. Now, remember, we now are talking on a higher level about what meditation means nowadays than we did in the past. We figured out that meditation can be mindful meditation. And mindful meditation doesn't mean that you're focusing on A, B, C, D, 18 prayers. Mindful meditation means that you're aware, you're opening your awareness of distraction, and you're able to thereby let those distractions not distract. It's becoming more aware rather than less aware, and then to concentrate on your breathing. I mean, in classical meditation, you're going to be doing breathing, you're going to be doing body scans, you're going to be doing meditations on, on the deterioration of your body from body to skeleton, whatever it is that makes you aware of your essence. That might not have been anything that the rabbis had a direct consciousness, cognizance of, but I do think that they were struggling. So, yeah.
I have a question. Were those three examples the only three halakha psuka that you could focus on, or there was just sort of providing examples?
These were providing examples.
Okay.
I don't think they're the only three. Halakha psuka but they happen to be put together. Abaye, Rava, and so on happen to be put together in this passage and picked out by some editors and thought these are really good examples. These, let's quote them. So that really begging the question, what makes them good examples?
So before I share my thought, I forget the third example.
So the third example is going to give us maybe a little bit more. I think it's the bloodletting. Bloodletting is,
okay.
Even if you...
So I think for me, what connected the three examples, and maybe it is part of it, is there's two elements. One, they're very physical. Blood is very real life and growing, whereas so sort of separate from the meditative state. And the other, it seems like they talk about a wholeness, a completion, putting something back together and keeping the offering whole and not using any piece of it separately. And also the sort of, I don't know how they were thinking about it. There's different ways to think about the wholeness of the first example, but sort of a natural cycle kind of wholeness of women. So I don't know.
Yeah. I see where you're going. That's good. Now, my kind of analysis is based on a principle of understanding the Talmud, which is pretty obvious. The Talmud was written by guys, for guys, about guys. And, there's this simplicity to the guy mentality. I don't want to generalize too much here, but just bear with me for a minute. What are the things that distract men? Classically, I don't mean all men, not us sitting here, certainly not any of us, but other people, other men, out there. What are
sex, food.
So coming to mind first of all is sex, right? So if you're going to be sitting down to pray and you're 17 seconds has elapsed since you thought about sex last, you may be rebooting, recycling, and thinking about it again. I mean, look, it's the guy thing. You can't help it. So, and the rabbis of the Talmud made no hesitations about this. They were members of the fraternity, period.
No period. No period.
No. So here's how you stop thinking about sex, and that's the way I looked at it. A woman who sees a discharge, a drop of blood the size of a mustard seed, must sit and keep 7 clean days, where she sees no discharge, and then immerse herself before resuming having any regular marital relations. So what could turn you off from thinking about sex more than the idea that your significant other, in this case, the only option for significant other that they sanction is your wife, is having her discharge. So I might as well just say Shemona Esrei. and I really don't think it's far-fetched. So the other obvious thing that distracts people, I won't say just men, and I really don't want to say today that the only people distracted by thoughts of sex are men. Let's not be so general about it, but people in general. What are the other things that obviously distract us a great deal? Is taxes, finances. I mean, how many times during the day are you really worried about your finances? The market. Oh wait, the market's been open for 3 hours. I didn't check the market. How's my 401k? Is it up? Is it down? Is the Great Depression here yet? But how I gotta go say mincha, but the market's open. How am I gonna do this? So Rabbi Hosheas gave us what I consider to be a loophole, a tax loophole. He says, if you want to avoid the halacha of masrot, you just mix the chaff and the grain back together and bring it into the house. That way, it doesn't become liable. And so you can, just eat away. So, oh yeah, tax loophole. Yeah, okay. I'm not worried about finances anymore. I can pray. Yeah.
About 10%.
Hey, maybe you should just think, the greatest president to ever live is President Trump, because the market's up 20% since he's been in office. Wow. And then you can go and pray. Otherwise, you're just going to be completely distracted. Now, the third one about letting blood from animals dedicated to the temple. I'm not sure I ever got a general principle out of that one, but I think I said something to the effect that, where was it that I was saying something? It's a legal ruling that allows you to say you let blood from animals dedicated to the temple can derive no personal benefit. Something about the absolute inability for anyone to understand the workings of the hierarchies of bureaucracies, because bureaucracy fighting is also one big distraction. If you've ever gotten into some issue over taxation or nowadays, what's our biggest bureaucracy that we're fighting with? If you, God forbid, have to go to a doctor, right? Insurance, right? I just got a bill from a doctor, from a hospital, from a this, from a that. I can't figure it out. Then deductible, copay, $93,000 for 1 day in the hospital. What's going on here? I can't pray. So then, if there's something you can think about with regard to the temple hierarchy that is more settling and more straightforward, or very much I like the down to earth, the physical, and it brings you back to the ground. You're grounded. And basically, the term grounded did not exist in the year 1985 when I first started writing. Nobody in the world of, other than very spiritual communities, was talking about how do we get grounded. Now we walk into a room and we say to each other, how am I going to get grounded today? You know, how am I going to feel my essence? And people look at you saying, yeah, I've been thinking about it. Everybody here is thinking about that same thing.
Well, I mean, you start off by saying you can't study cases that are unsettled, and I heard, but settling and grounding are like synonyms almost.
Yes.
So if you're settled, you can start prayer talking about unsettled cases.
Yes. No, that's why it's very difficult if you're a Talmudist that to get around these particular rules about, that are enunciated, that you obviously joking around, casting up, one-liners, things like that. Those are clearly distractions, because what do you want to do when you hear a joke? Well, you want to one-up that joke. You want to tell a better joke. I don't know about you, but if you tell me a joke, I got two that are funnier. So how are you going to pray? How are you going to pray if you're lighthearted or distracted in the most obvious way? But these are the more serious distractions of life. And I have to say, I really believe that these little devices, these screens, these things, it even comes to my watch now. I mean, I don't have to look for distractions. I don't have to search for things that hold me back from meditation. They're all around and they're constant. And so I think this is one of our greatest challenges, is to extend these very quirky examples into our lives and say, what are the things that we can do in order to make our break from our daily constant world of distraction and stop and take tefillah or kriyat shema or whatever else it is that you're doing for your meditative moments. And how are we going to actually make those more meaningful and more spiritual?
Yes, thank you very, very much. Great. So I want to thank you for introducing a topic that is the same time about meditation and about Talmud. I'm impressed. I thought that was really that was great. I wanted to say that one thing that I saw in the question that you posed was that settled law as opposed to deciding a case is less likely to bring up my own inner conflicts, like that I'm going to try to argue that case again, but more like to bring me into a state of acceptance. And the other thing that I noticed is that all three cases have to do with separation, like something that separates from itself, actually. That each one is like blood coming out of a being, or a husk coming off of grain. So to me, there was almost a hint of the idea that meditation requires a certain kind of self-separation. And I thought that was
Yes,
kind of
that's
cool.
very good. I mean, it is really cessation, yes.
It's a lahavdil mode.
Yeah.
That was the opposite, is coming back together, mind and body connecting. So it's
Right. Right, but it requires the detachment from the process, so you can observe the process, right? Yeah, wonderful.
But postscript to that is, but mindful meditation, as I've practiced and learned it, is really the ability to hear those distractions and still be able to do the meditation. You can never really separate yourself from the world of distractions. You're carrying it with you. I hear music in the background. I hear construction outside. I hear people talking loud. And I still need to meditate. And the ability to maintain connection to the world, that connection doesn't stop you from achieving meditative reality.
Thank you so much.
Okay, well, go learn.
Yes.
That was
Go
a
on.
nice
so
way
one
of
can-
addressing attention and attention deficit, or like lighthearted.
Mm.
It's nice,
That's
much
true.
nicer children maybe.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Continue your spelunking.
Lighthearted.
My choice of name, so I like to address on it.
Yes, well,
Yeah.
Yeah, I have.
This is,
This
thing
paper
you're
is
up to.
When I read a paper, they
We gotta go.
after years, and I really want to rewrite it. I mean, I really feel like there have been
Nice,
things that I have
Nice try.
on the road. I would like, so I might,
Yeah,
I
That
I've
was
been up
great.
with Daniel
Now-
Boyer for a while.
Recognition,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
revisiting how my mind has changed.
It's a terrific interpretation. I really benefit from it a lot.
You know, the quirkier the better, because it really requires you to stop and think, why are you telling me this?
Yes.
The classic question, why are you telling me this? All right, take care. Thanks for inviting me.
Fun.
Something lighthearted before we go into,
I'm sorry.
something lighthearted before we go into,
Yeah.
at 7:30 this morning, he sends out an email saying, bring these things into class. I'm saying, what am I gonna bring these things into class?
Right.
Unless it's on my computer, I mean, I can bring it in on my computer.
Do you have your computer with you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, baby.
Hello.
I was kind of waiting for that last night,
Yeah.
and it came this morning.